Welcome back to the Stack Shack Sports Show. Today, we're going to go through every single NFL game as we do every week and give some quick rapid fire thoughts. We're going to pause on a couple of the games as we go through that I think are the most important. But let's just start with the first game, Thursday night. We haven't talked about this one. Patriots Steelers. Patriots get the win. As far as comments, yeah, I don't know what to say. I don't think I learned much. The Steelers without Kenny Pickett couldn't get the win. The Steelers have been winning a lot of close games. Their offense hasn't been particularly good all season. And this is the NFL, right? Really disappointing that Mitch Trubisky's leading in rushing yards. Pretty unfortunate for the Steelers. They got to be able to run the ball better than that. Are the Steelers a playoff team? I don't know. I have a feeling that they will not make the playoffs, but we'll have to see as we go. Moving on to Sunday, the Jets erupt for a big win over the Texans. Zach Wilson comes back and plays fairly well. So obviously you had the injury to CJ Stroud in that game. He goes out with the concussion, so I think that obviously affects him. But yeah, second half, Jets really came alive and scored 30 points. So good on them. I don't think the Jets are a playoff team. Maybe they squeak in. I definitely don't think they win anything against any of the best teams in the playoffs. Rams honestly gave the Baltimore Ravens all they could handle, right? We got a walk-off touchdown there in overtime for the Ravens to get the win over the Rams. Honestly, pretty impressed with the Rams. I think they're maybe a little bit underrated, a little bit forgotten about. Now they are 6-7, so hard to say anything. But the other thing I will say is Ravens, I think they're one of the best teams in the NFL. I really do. We'll talk at the end of this video about who I think is the best team. I think the Ravens are up there, have a good argument for it. Got a tough win. It was at home, which helps, against Rams, who don't play the Ravens all that often, which we've talked extensively about how the first or second, or if you don't see Lamar Jackson all that often, he can kind of unload on you. So, good day from him, but a great day for Matt Stafford as well. Kyron Williams has been a great pickup for the Rams. Close game. Impressed with the Rams to be able to keep it close, but also impressed with the Ravens to get that win. That's the sign of a good team to win those close games, I think. Man, are the Panthers bad. I think we have to have a real discussion about Bryce Young being a miss. I thought he was going to be. He's, you know, he made some great plays at Alabama. He honestly covered up for a lot of mistakes at Alabama, but he still had Alabama wide receivers and offensive line. And, getting to the NFL, there's a reason I think most Alabama quarterbacks just don't work unless they have really great athletes around them, because they're used to having those great athletes around them. I mean, Bryce Young, 13 for 36, 137 yards. That's really not great. I mean, Derek Carr's not too much better. He only threw for 119 yards, but the completion percentage is, that is abysmal. Completion percentage for Bryce Young. They're asking a lot of him. It's not the best roster. So, don't sell all your stock. But I think we found someone who just would need the right situation. And it's very similar to the other quarterbacks that have come out of Alabama. Mac Jones. Just, even with a good defense, now he doesn't have a lot of weapons, but when he doesn't have a lot of weapons, he doesn't do super well. Tua. Before weapons and after weapons, before and after Tyreek Hill gets added and Waddle gets added. And they become the fastest team on the planet with one of the most creative offensive head coaches. Before that, he wasn't very good. Now, he's pretty good. And I think that's the case with a lot of quarterbacks. If you put the best pieces around them, a lot of these guys coming out of college can play. But if you don't have the right pieces around them, there's only a few quarterbacks that can elevate the rest of the team like that. So Panthers, yeah, are just terrible. I don't think they take a quarterback in this draft. I think they look to trade maybe some picks and things to just get Bryce Young some help, because I feel it would be a bad idea to just bail on him after 1 year, rookie season with no help. That seems a little harsh, but we'll have to see what they do. Saints, uh, the Saints are the Saints. They're 6-7. Will they squeak in? It really just depends on who wins that division, and we'll talk about the Bucks and Falcons here in a moment. Moving on to the Bengals Colts. This was a big game, honestly, for both of these teams because of playoff implications. Both now at 7-6. But Bengals are going to hold the tiebreaker. Pretty impressive what the Bengals have done. After Joe Burrow goes down, Jake Browning comes in and looks pretty great. Colts, got to give them credit for what they've done with their quarterback situation. Anthony Richardson going down earlier in the season. They're fighting for that playoff spot. So are the Bengals. This was a huge win for the Bengals to get that tiebreaker over them should it be tied, as these teams are going to be fighting for that playoff spot. I'm leaning, because of this win, I think money would probably be on the Bengals to get in, but we'll have to see. They got a tough schedule coming down the stretch, but it's against a lot of playoff teams, which is going to give them a lot of tiebreakers and hand their opponents a lot of losses if they can win those games. So that's what we talked about earlier last week, where we said, hey, the Bengals, it's really just going to come down to who wins those games. If they win out, they're going to be in the playoffs because they play so many teams that they would need tiebreakers over. Welcome to the Falcons and Bucks. Close game, battled. Falcons kind of came back in the fourth quarter to make it a game, but the Bucks get the win. Baker Mayfield, okay. Desmond Ridder actually had a pretty darn good day, threw for a bunch of yards. This is the division. Saints. If I can click the right thing here. Bucks, Falcons, all 6-7. The winner of that division is getting into the playoffs as the division winner. I don't see any other teams making it into the playoffs. I had a feeling preseason, I think I picked the Falcons and the Saints to make it because I thought the Bucks would be worse than they are. Bucks have surprised me a little bit this season. Got a lot of wins. 6 wins. But they're, just beating up on the Panthers is what they're doing. So I envisioned the Saints and the Falcons beating up on the Bucks and the Panthers. Turns out it's just the Panthers that were really bad. But I don't think any of those 3 or 4 teams are Super Bowl contenders in any way. It's just battle for the playoffs, see if you can make a big upset. Jags, Browns. The Browns just keep finding ways to win. Obviously, you got Trevor in here. Had an okay day, not a great completion percentage. Flacco. Let's just talk a minute about the backup quarterbacks. And I think this is really interesting this season. I feel like in previous seasons, we've had similar numbers of quarterback injuries. We have quarterback injuries every season. But I feel like this season, it's been a lot of the really good teams that have had the quarterback injuries, like high-profile guys going down. And guys on teams that are really, maybe Super Bowl bubble or at least definitely playoff teams, right? Burrow going down, Deshaun Watson going down, Kenny Pickett, Trevor Lawrence had the ankle thing. And it hasn't been, down for the season necessarily, but Aaron goes down. There's been a lot, but what I think has been very impressive to me is these teams that have then brought in a backup. We got some great stories around the league. We got Joe Flacco. Dude wasn't even playing. Comes in, slings it around, 3 touchdowns. Looked pretty darn good. Outduels Trevor Lawrence. The 3 picks definitely had something to do with that. Cleveland Browns defense is legit. Pretty interesting. I had a feeling the Browns were going to fall out, but I don't know. Flacco seems decent. Maybe they'll get a little more tape and defenses will adjust, but right now, looking okay. And I think it's interesting. Around the league, you see that. Minshew comes in for the Colts, has some good numbers. Jake Browning for the Bengals, we were just looking at him. Good numbers. And all these backups coming in. We'll talk about the Giants at the end of today because that's the most recent game, but pretty impressive. Moving on to the Bears and the Lions. What is happening to the Lions? They are just falling apart. Got to give credit where credit's due. Justin Fields, again, still not super accurate with the ball, but he's not turning it over. He's making some great plays, running for 58 yards and a touchdown. It's pretty good. Pretty good. Jared Goff, struggling. Jared Goff, the story on him is the story it's always been. Is the offensive line good enough to keep him protected? And as this season has progressed, that offensive line has been a little more shaky, and he's started to turn the ball over, not be able to push the ball downfield. I mean, we're looking at 161 yards on 20 completions. That's well less than 10 yards of completion. So, concern for the Lions. I don't know what's going on there. They looked really good at the beginning of the year, and now the Bears are putting up 28 points on them, and Jared Goff's throwing interceptions. Definitely on the downward trend. Got to give Justin Fields credit, though. He's played well the last few weeks and gotten the Bears back to 5-8, which is, respectable for, I think, how we all saw them at the beginning of the season with their losing streaks there. Moving on to who spoiler alert, I think is the best team in the NFL. The San Francisco 49ers. They beat up on the Seahawks. I mean, look at that for consistency. 1 touchdown every quarter. Ta-da. Pretty impressive. Brock Purdy is just slinging it. I mean, talk about a completion percentage we like. But we got Drew Lock coming in, right? Geno's not playing, so another backup quarterback. This one, maybe not as good, but he's had some good moments. This is just how this is going to go. Divisional rivalry, so it's going to be closer than how the San Francisco 49ers have beat up on some other people, just because the Seahawks know how to play them, but there's still no stopping them when they're healthy. Yeah, that happened. I'm just going to move on. Broncos Chargers. What a turnaround here. I mean, Broncos, laughing stock of the league at the beginning of the season, and now they've got a winning record. And they beat everybody's darling, the Chargers. Now, Justin Herbert out for the season, so that's a significant hit there for the Chargers. But the Chargers at this point, with that announcement that Herbert's done, they're just going to ride out the season, take their draft picks. I don't think their coach is coming back. They're going to reload, get a new coach, build around Justin Herbert, find out. I think I see it as almost a Tua situation where you just, all right, let's just load him up, make it as easy as possible for Herbert to succeed, because we really do think he's good, and see what happens. So, good on the Broncos charging here, making maybe a push for a playoff position. Russell seems to be doing better. I mean, if you looked at his stats this season, he's much better this year with Sean Payton. Got to give him some credit, turning that team into a 7-6 team within the season, too. I mean, this is the team that got blown out by the Dolphins, and we were all laughing at how they got beat by their ball boy. But they got a winning record right now, and that's impressive. That's hard to do in the NFL. All right, this one. I do want to take a moment to chat about this one, because we talked about it already this week, but I wanted to add something as there's been some discussions. I appreciate all the comments on that. But let's talk first about the game. Bills get the win. This was an important win for the Bills and their playoff hopes. It really honestly was. Chiefs fall to 8-5. 7-6, 8-5. That's starting to become interesting. Keep your eye on that race. This is a situation, I think, and it's been said by many other people, The Chiefs are having a bit of a down year. I think we would all admit that. And I think part of it is Mahomes is getting paid a lot of money. And that's not a knock on Mahomes at all. I ripped him earlier this week for some unsportsmanlike behavior, but go get the bag. I mean, Burrow did it, Lamar did it. I mean, go get the bag, go get your money. But in those situations, you're gonna have to deal with young receivers that make dumb mistakes. Kadarius Toney lining up off sides. You're gonna have to deal with maybe some young players on the offensive line, some young players trying to fill in the tight end position because Kelsey's getting a little older and banged up every once in a while. So this is the product of what happens when you start paying a quarterback a lot of money. And it's not to say that you can't win Super Bowls and you can't be really successful paying a quarterback a lot of money. You're just going to have to start dealing with, you don't have Tyreek. You don't have Juju Smith-Schuster. You don't have... It starts to add up. Now, the defense is much better this year for Kansas City than maybe it has ever been under the Mahomes era. So that's a positive for Kansas City. But they got to figure out the offense. I mean, we've got lots of drops. We've got dumb penalties. They got to figure out that receiver room. Unfortunately, they don't have the trade deadline is passed, so you can't go get a veteran guy in that room. It's a bit unfortunate for Kansas City that they're in this situation. Do I think they can win a Super Bowl? I don't know. I don't like counting out Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. They're one of the best quarterback coach duos ever. And so that's something to consider. But big win for the Bills. Josh Allen has kind of, helped himself. Now, he's still turning the ball over. I mean, it's probably one of the best bets every week is a anytime interception by Josh Allen. He's going to throw a pick. It feels like every single game. So that's concerning because in a big spot, you don't want it to hurt you. If Kadarius Toney lines up on sides, it did hurt you in this one, right? Like that's the reality of the Bills, but good for them to get a win. It's been very tumultuous with firing coaches and things. So good on the Bills to get a win. Kansas City, you got to figure out that receiver room, man. I don't know what it is. You got to coach them up. You got to find somebody on the practice squad that can catch the ball. I mean, I don't know. You just got to make do with your roster as it is. But moving on and just addressing some comments. Again, I said I would. There were some great comments on the video for this reaction that I gave earlier the week where I called out Mahomes, said I lost a lot of respect for the Chiefs. And I want to highlight one comment in particular that I actually think is a fair critique of my position and brought up a thought that I hadn't had before. So this is the comment that I think I didn't address. I haven't replied to this one. I had a discussion with this user a little bit further above, but he brings up this point that everyone finally has something to complain about Mahomes, right? He's got no cheating scandals, no infidelities or domestic abuse, no criminal past, right? Just dude that married his high school sweetheart and kicks everybody else's ass. And you know what? I actually think that is a fair critique. Okay? Do I think he should have gotten away with the unsportsmanlike conduct? No, I'm gonna rip him for that. But I do think it is a bit of a fair critique that maybe part of the reason we've all freaked out about that behavior is because it wasn't really in character of Mahomes to do that, at least from what we've seen, right? I totally was a fan of Mahomes, and I would say I still am, and maybe this comment has toned down, and I've had to realize that maybe I'm overreacting a little bit, just because this is a one-off situation. Mahomes has never, in my recollection, ever been disrespectful to another player on the field. And so I think that's why it came as such a shock, at least to me. And maybe that's why I got a little heated about it because it did feel out of character for Mahomes. He does seem like a solid dude. Go watch the quarterback documentary on Netflix. I think he came across very positive light there. I've seen other content about him and seems like a really great guy, and maybe that's why there was so much backlash. We like to see the heroes fall sometimes, and this was he finally made a big mistake. And I'm not denying that it was a big mistake. But I think this commenter does have a bit of a point that maybe we're overreacting a little bit and making a bigger deal out of something that was, hey, it's one guy in the heat of the moment. I don't really have a problem. Again, I said in the video about him getting real heated on the sidelines. Maybe it's a little overblown, aggressive on the sidelines, having to be like held back to go yell at the ref. Maybe be careful with that. But it's your sidelines. Go crazy. People have outbursts on the sidelines all the time. I think there can be some leadership in that. We compared it to Brady. Brady was very vocal on the sidelines. I just don't think it was in the same regard. And the big mistake, and Mahomes admitted it, so I got to give him again some credit for that, was the after the game. In the heat of the moment, you're yelling at the ref. All right, fine. That happens all game long from every player. But after the game to Josh Allen is the big problem, and maybe we are making a little bit bigger deal because we finally had a moment where Mahomes messed up. Now, I wouldn't say I was waiting for him to mess up. I was still supporting the guy, but to see that happen, to see it feel a bit out of character to me, that's I think why things got blown up as much as they did. So I appreciate all the comments. We've got a great comment section on this video. If you haven't checked it out, go check it out. You can see my full thoughts on the Chiefs, but that kind of sums that part of it up. So that kind of sums up this game, and, we'll move on. We'll see how things go next week for both of these teams. All right. Eagles. What is happening to the Eagles? Their defense is really starting to show a lot of holes. I think they've given up over 30 points in the last 3 games. That's not Super Bowl contender kind of football. Coming into these weeks, now they are still 10-3, so maybe we shouldn't overreact too much. Just like we shouldn't maybe overreact as much about Mahomes and his character from one bad moment. Maybe we shouldn't react over the Philadelphia Eagles too much for a couple of rough weeks on defense, but I think it's starting to be a real concern. Dak Prescott looked comfortable, and the Eagles offense did not look comfortable. There's some reports coming out from players on the Eagles saying that they are disappointed with the lack of creativity on offense, and it is important to note that Eagles did lose their offensive coordinator in the offseason. Are we seeing something similar to when the Bills lost Brian Daboll? Bills offense, it was rough. It's choppy. We got some people getting fired for different things. When you lose that really good offensive coordinator, there's sometimes a regression. We've seen it before, and we'll see it again. So I don't know. This is concerning if you're an Eagles fan. Now, if you are a Cowboys fan, I think it's time to actually start talking about the Cowboys as one of the best teams in the NFL this year. I think because of the fan base, there's a tendency to maybe get super excited or build up the Cowboys too early before they've really, done anything. I think the Cowboys, because they are such a big fan base and somewhat of a polarizing fan base, you kind of either love them or hate them. It's easy with the Cowboys to always just overreact to every single game, but I think we've seen a pattern here. Dak has mostly gotten rid of the interceptions from last year, is playing really well, and their defense, yes, they lost Diggs, and we thought, oh no. And it was choppy for a little bit, but they seem to have gotten right back on track. And that offense is humming right now. You got to give them credit. I think Cowboys are one of the best teams, and we'll talk about the best teams and how I would rank them after we get through these last two games. But the Cowboys, very impressive win. Eagles, starting to feel concerned. I'm going to try and not overreact yet. Moving on to our Monday night games. Giants with Tommy DeVito beat the Packers. Yeah, I don't know. This is impressive. I think impressive coaching, especially from Dable. I think they're drafting a quarterback. Daniel Jones just isn't it. Daniel Jones has about the same numbers as Tyrod Taylor and Tommy DeVito. So why are you paying Daniel Jones? That's still, I think, the worst contract in the NFL. It's kind of ridiculous. Dable is a great coach, though, so he's making things work. Packers, they're a young team. Will they make the playoffs? Probably. I mean, I don't know. It's going to be close. We'll see how the Lions do. If the Lions keep falling, Packers might win that division. I mean, this is interesting. But Packers are a young team. I think they're going to have highs and lows. They've had some great games, and they've had some duds, and this one was a bit of a dud. I mean, played them close. Again, fourth quarter, score 9 points, kind of come back a little bit, but not great. One touchdown and then a lot of field goals. So that's concerning. It's a young team. They make dumb mistakes, and they're going to have some highs and lows. That's where they are. If they have a high in the playoffs, I could see them winning a playoff game. They do have the dudes. That offense has got some playmakers, but I don't think you can trust them for an entire playoff run. All right, let's talk about this one. Will Levis. I think Will Levis can play. I don't know about y'all, but I think Will Levis can play. Pretty impressive. Dolphins. They are very, very Tyreek Hill dependent. Let me get to his stats today. He had 4 catches for 61 yards. Dealing with a bit of an ankle injury. When Tyreek Hill does not get over 100 yards, the Dolphins are not the same team. And with him having a bit of an injury concern, Dolphins could be in trouble a little bit. That could be an issue moving forward. We'll see this week if he even plays. If I was the Dolphins, I'd probably sit him. Make sure that ankle gets healthy, make sure he doesn't re-aggravate it, and make sure he's ready for a run in the playoffs. But man, Dolphins are a bit of a hit or miss team. They typically beat up on the bad teams. This time they didn't, which is a little concerning. Tyreek Hill injury, I think, is your biggest concern if you're a Dolphins fan. If he plays, then you got a chance against pretty much everybody because he's that explosive. But certain matchups, you're gonna struggle. That team has a lockdown corner that can really shut you down. You might be in big issues there in Miami. Let me talk briefly about who I think are the Super Bowl contenders following this week's games. I think the best team in the NFL to me is the 49ers. As long as they are healthy, they are the best team. And we've seen that this year. Deebo Samuel goes out with an injury. 49ers not the same team, lose a few games. Deebo comes back, they're still blowing everybody out. They're blowing out good teams. 49ers, if everybody is healthy, are the Super Bowl favorites in my mind right now. They are the best team in the NFL. Now, number 2 is where I think it gets a little interesting. I'm actually thinking I am leaning towards the Cowboys. I think the Cowboys are the second best team in the NFL. What a rivalry that is, 49ers and Cowboys. Got some great moments over the years. Cool to see both of them back being successful. I think the Cowboys are number 2, making me look terrible every single week for my preseason predictions where I had them finishing last in the division. Yeah, that I don't know why you guys even watch me after that one. That was just a miss. Just a flat out miss. Got some other decent ones though. You can go watch that video again. Laugh at my terrible picks. But third, I think it's Ravens. I think that's your top 3, and I'd almost be keen to say I can't count out Mahomes and Andy Reid, and maybe there will be a team that surprises me. I mean, I was a Bengals fan. I saw Joe Burrow go out, and I was like, well, we're done. And then we keep winning. I'm like, oh, well, this is a pretty darn good roster. Maybe it's got a shot, you know? Bills can have moments, too, that you're just like, wow, that looks like the best team on the planet. The Lions have played a bunch of teams close and won a bunch of big games, so, you know, they're decent. But I really think your Super Bowl teams, where I would expect one of these teams to make it to the Super Bowl, it's Niners, Cowboys, and Ravens. Obviously, that's barring injuries. There's been an injury history at the Niners. That's why they struggled to not make it to the Super Bowl last year. Cowboys, I feel like, are maybe the most healthy team as far as historically. Dak really has no injury history, or very little injury history. CeeDee Lamb doesn't really have a history of injuries. Pollard maybe a little bit more, but they're not super reliant on him. So I think they're in a really good position. And then Baltimore comes down to Lamar's health. He has a history of injuries, but he's not been really hurt this year. So those are the top 3 teams in my mind. I think there are some teams maybe on the outside looking in at that Super Bowl matchup that could still obviously make a run. I think you can never count out the Chiefs. I don't know what to do with the Browns right now with Joe Flacco, but that seems somewhat interesting. The Bengals seem somewhat interesting. Dolphins, when we're looking at them right now, they lost to the Titans, but if Tyreek is healthy for the entire game, who knows if that changes. There's a lot of these kind of mediocre teams, but I do feel like 3 teams have separated. The Niners, the Cowboys, and the Ravens. Let me know in the comments down below what you think. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing so we can keep making great content like this. And we will see you tomorrow.